Now I know what you're thinking. The wires are actually supposed to be connected, not cut. You're right. Here's the issue. Here we are, guys. Getting right to it. Got this wiring here. Mostly disconnected. I'm gonna go ahead and undo this screw here. I'm gonna pull this wiring back out. So the way I have this routed is, obviously, this is the back wheel well. You're gonna want to go through the channel down here at the bottom, and it's going to go along the bottom of the car here. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your front wheel off. You're gonna take the cover that goes on this area here. It scoops underneath the car, so when you take these 58 bolts that they have here to hold on to a cover just in case, don't forget the other two that are at the bottom. You can see them. You can see them here. Forearm's got a pump from taking off all these bolts. Anyway, so can't really see in here, but let's see if I can get it better. Long story short, there's a channel that runs through the bottom of the car, and it comes out right through here. So if you were to look through there, you can actually see daylight on the other side. You're gonna run that wiring through here. You're gonna run it up this way, and what happens is when you look down, actually you can kind of see, right, this area here, you're gonna bring the wiring up. The way I have it threaded is I brought it up, brought it at the bottom of this tank, and basically it runs. One wire goes to the alternator, the other wire goes here. I use this bolt here to hold on to this fuse. That way, if I ever have to check the fuse, I simply just undo the clip. I can take a look at the fuse, looks good, and plug it right back in. Not to mention it's not flopping around. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this current wiring harness, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread the new one through. I highly recommend buying, well, maybe not just yet, but I'll let you guys know. I got this fiberglass wire running kit from Harbor Freight. It's like $8. Anyway, you're going to need it because there's nothing that you can really get into this channel that's long enough. I ended up using my dowel pins that I used when I did my camshaft swap. I basically taped them together and pushed the wiring through all the way over. It worked. It's just not the right tool for the right job, and if you're going to reuse those dowel pins, you don't want a bunch of crap on them and introduce them into the motor. So anyway, I think this was like maybe $8-10 at Harbor Freight. I think it's worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this now. Once I thread it through, actually before I do that, I'll probably pull this wiring harness out and do a side-by-side comparison. It looks like the new wiring harness for the dual pump setup is basically this but double. So I'll go ahead and do a side-by-side really quick before I install it, just so you guys have an idea. Also, when you guys set your car on jack stands, so you're gonna have one over there, two back here, or at least that's how I have it set up. Just remember when you're lifting one edge of the car over here, it does twist the body. You don't really want the car sitting like that for very long. So I jacked it up over there, and when I sat it down back here, they're actually at two different heights, these jack stands, just to make sure that the body's not twisting while I'm working on the car. Make sure you guys are always using jack stands. Guys, safety first. Alright guys, let me show you guys what's going on here. So back there, you'll see the channel that I'm talking about that we're going to pull the wiring through. You can actually see their wiring going through there right now. Up here, and it's a little bit of a mess. I was kind of in a hurry when I put this together. I'll probably clean it up at a later time. But this is the inside driver wheel well. What you're looking at here is I dropped this wiring harness from up there, dropped it down. As you can see, I have it zip tied here, and I have it running kind of up this little metal thing and then it crosses back over, and then it goes down into the channel. Also, while you're here, clean out these, I think they're called udders. Anyway, make sure you guys clean those out. Those are known to get completely filled with leaves and crud. So this is a perfect time to go ahead and pull those off, clean them, put them back on. This is how your water drains from like the windshield and outside of the car. Obviously, because it's so close to these udders, all the wiring that you put here or close to here, make sure it's completely insulated. You don't have any fuses sitting here or any kind of switches that might, where water might get into them and affect them. So, all right, here we are, guys. We have the old wiring harness taken off. This was the part that was underneath the hood. All right, so just for reference, and Racetronics actually has this on their website. They have it for the single pump. They do not have it for the double pump wiring. But anyway, this is the part that was underneath the hood. As you can see, this is the portion that was attached to the alternator. This is a little fuse I was showing you guys earlier, and then the rest of this kind of lives in the back of the car. This attached to the chassis, and then this was the part that was attached to the fuel pump, the ground, and of course the pigtails. I was a little bit wrong when I explained these to you guys the first time as I started to look at this. So again, we do have the fuses that go underneath the hood. The problem is these hookups that I assumed go onto the alternator and then a ground are actually, this is the important part about reading, guys, it's actually battery output and battery negative, as you can see it there. All right, so this part sits underneath the hood. The rest of this kind of gets pushed to the back of the car, and this part, again, it's two of those, right? Sit here, you got the ground chassis, and then you got the rest of the pigtail, which I have over here. So here's the issue that we're running into. You have these guys here, but when you walk over to look underneath the hood, here's what the battery looks like. So you have those two posts, and I actually removed one of the posts so I can show you guys what this looks like. So the post doesn't allow for addition of wires onto it. As you can see there, it's stubby and you can't really attach anything to it. You can't attach anything in front of it either, as far as I know. I haven't tried, but just looking at how this looks, it needs to sit flush onto that post there, so it makes good contact. So then I thought about attaching the positive to this bolt here. You have a wire that comes off of this positive post onto this fuse box that supplies power to the fuse box. I'm probably not going to do that, simply because I've had instances where I've done stuff like this and I learned that it is possible to reverse a ground or have take power away from something that's already rated for a certain amount. So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at this wire here, it's a specific size. This wire that runs to this post, a specific size, sized out to run this fuse box. By the way, this is the wire that I attached to this relay, so it powers my gauges on the inside. That way when I turn it on, the gauges turn on. So I know it's kind of rigged. I'll fix it later. But anyway, I thought about attaching it here and attaching it down there. You can see that there's an actual ground right down there. Right there. The problem with that is I don't want it to rob power from anything else that it's powering. So here's what I'm gonna plan on doing. I'm gonna modify this, and by modifying it, I'm gonna completely replace it. Let me show you what I plan on doing here. This is either gonna work or it's gonna fail miserably. So I got one of these things from Harbor Freight. I always have them laying around just in case I need something, which in this case it paid off. This bolt here, 3/8 by 1.5 inches, threads into the battery. However, this is where things get even better. Where is it? These guys, the bolt doesn't actually fit through this hole. There are these holes. So I'm probably gonna have to modify these things to allow it to fit onto here. However, when you take this bolt and you try to install it onto the battery, the issue you run into is you have this cable here, this negative cable, and the first 1/2 inch is just a gap, and then you have the metal. So that's what this part here takes up. This whole 1/2 inch here takes up that slack. So you can't just thread this bolt in and expect it to hold, simply because it'll be very, very loose. Let me show you guys here what this looks like. Right, so if you were to just put the bolt, see how the entire head sinks in? So what I plan on doing is I'm actually going to cut the head, and I'm going to thread the stud in, and I'm basically going to stud the battery, and then I'm going to be able to put that on this wire here, the negative terminal, onto the stud, and then thread on a nut, and then put the wires for the fuel pump, and then another nut. It's important to note that when you're doing this, you got to remember that if you ever have to jump the car, you have to have enough stud sticking out to put the clamps on. I'm sure I could probably make this work by sticking the wire onto here and somehow clamping it down, but one, I don't want to ruin the threads on there if I don't have enough engagement, simply because there's not a lot of threads here that engage. And two, I don't want to make this thing too short, just in case I do ever have to jump the car. You know, you have to have something to clamp onto. So I'm going to go ahead and thread that wiring through the side of the car. Once I get to this point, I'll go ahead and make these studs, try to get some measurements for you guys and let you know if it works. You guys know the saying, if the car didn't burn down, then we succeeded. So catch you guys here shortly. Alright guys, I'm back. Just want to give you guys a quick update. Tried pushing the wires through the body of the Corvette, and here's what we ended up with. Now I know what you're thinking. The wires are actually supposed to be connected, not cut. You're right. Here's the issue. When I went to thread this giant thing through here, it got stuck. So what I did was I took some trusty tape and I taped this back, taped this together, and started threading it through. Now when I tell you guys this thing got stuck midway through the car and I panicked. I mean, it was borderline funny, because the issue is when you're threading it through this part here, there's no way to get into here. So had that pigtail gotten stuck here, which it did, and I wasn't able to yank it back out, that would have been really, really bad. So I ended up figuring out that I could probably just cut the wires. And the way I cut the wires here is I cut them at different lengths because I'm gonna butt connect them. You don't want to cut it all in one area, because you're gonna have a huge lump of butt connectors. You want to do it in different areas. And then I have some of this insulation that I bought that's a little bit bigger, that I'm gonna go ahead and once I connect all this, make sure everything is good, I'll insulate so it looks good. So show you guys that I was successful here. Boom, there it is. So I'm just gonna go ahead and untape this, pull the wiring through. I did check the length. It looks like the wiring can go all the way to the other side of the car, drop down, go all the way back here, and I'll still be able to mount this stuff over here. And if not, well, we'll figure something else out. All right, see you guys shortly. All right, welcome back, guys. We are getting to the final stretch of the double pumper install in the C5 Corvette. I wanted to show you guys what I've done with the wiring here. So last I left off with the video, we had to cut the wiring harness for the fuel pumps that goes through the side of the car, comes over the engine. Not exactly my preferred way of doing things, but had to do it to route the wires through. So here's what I've done. As you guys know, I mentioned to you that when you cut these wires, if you choose to do it this way, I'd cut them at different areas. That way when you put them together, you don't have a lump, or at least a noticeable lump anywhere. A couple of things to note: these wires, the thicker wires are 10 gauge. The thinner wires are, I don't know, maybe 16, 18 gauge. Nevertheless, you're going to need the yellow and the red butt connectors here, so make sure you guys have those before you take on this project. One of the things that I was going to do was cut this outer shielding here, lump the wires together and put a larger shielding over it, thinking that this wasn't going to fit inside of here, but I think I can get it to fit. So before I do that, I'm going to take some electrical tape. I've tugged on both ends of these wires here to make sure they don't come apart. That's the last thing you want, is these wires coming apart that control your fuel pump. So tugged a little bit on them, no movement. I looked inside. The stripped part of the wire does go all the way down to the little stopper that's in the center of the butt connector. So make sure that looks good when you clamp it down, to make sure that you have good contact. Here you can see I stripped a little bit too much of the wire, but it's not exposed past the butt connector. Nevertheless, I'm still gonna wrap the electrical tape around it, and then I'm gonna put this together, and I'm gonna attempt to put the shielding back on, and then electrical tape the shielding where I cut it to make it look a little bit nicer. So stay tuned. We'll see how this works out. So here's what it looks like. Hopefully that'll do. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and tuck the wiring in. Gotta drill these out a little bit, make the posts, check the fitment, looks like I may have to maybe loop around this way through here, and then don't forget we still have to install the Hobbs switch, the tubing for that, and then the wiring, which the wiring I ended up ordering the 5-foot wiring for it. So alright guys, so drilling these things out is a little bit tougher than I actually thought. So I think I've discovered a trick. I got this guy drilled, working on the last one. I'm using these smaller pliers. I'm putting the terminal between this little void here that you see. Make sure you don't clamp down too hard. All you're trying to do is make sure it doesn't twist. Got my step drill, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go slowly into the hole, and then once it starts binding, I'm going to reverse to round the hole back out. Keep in mind, you keep your drill on low. Do not use high speed on this. Right. Okay, not enough. So once this thing binds once, what happens is it twists, and then every single time you try after that, it just continues to bind. So I am just going to flip it back around and continue to drill. All right, let's take a look here. Are we good or not? We are good. All right guys, so here's the plan. So I have one of the studs in the vice grip as of right now. The plan is to basically cut the stud right underneath the head here to give us enough meat after we put the terminal on to get a washer and a nut on there, and still have a little bit to clamp onto if you ever need to jump start your car for any reason. I'm gonna use one of these rotary tools. Got this one at Walmart for like 20 bucks, and then bunch of little attachments for it for I think another 20 bucks, so 40 bucks. I'm gonna go ahead and use this. Make sure you're wearing your eyes for this. You can probably use the larger grinder. I used to use those all the time. For me, it takes off a little too much metal, and it's just not as precise. This is actually my first time ever doing this with a smaller rotary tool, so let's see if I like it. Alright, turned out to be a pretty clean cut. What you want to do at this point in time is you want to take off the nut from that side, make sure that the threads cannot engage. It's pretty sharp here, and the way I cut it, and the reason I used this smaller wheel is you kind of have to cut it to where you have a clean start on the threads. You don't want to have the threads all mangled, because at that point in time, to try to get the nut started on there, you're gonna have to clean up the threads, and it's not worth the work. So this little guy here takes a little bit longer, but I don't know, my opinion, worth it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one as well. All right, just a quick update for you guys. We have the studs installed onto the battery. As you can see, I propped one of the negative terminals up. So here's what I did. Inside of these terminals, you see an insert here to take up the slack on the inside of that terminal. What I used for that is part of the bearing that I had for my trunnion upgrade. I have a bunch of these laying around, so I ended up using this. It actually works out pretty good. It's the exact thickness of the original bolt, so I put it inside this way so the lip actually presses on the inside of the terminal to ensure that it makes contact. While you're at it, you may want to clean up these contacts. Mine were a little cloudy, so I went ahead and used that rotary tool you guys saw me use earlier. Clean it up to where it's nice and shiny. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to install the stud. You're going to put this over it. Then I used a washer to ensure that it presses this part here uniformly onto the battery. So terminal on, washer, then it's going to be the wiring, then a locking washer, and then a nut. And this is kind of what it looks like. Doesn't stick out too far, easy to get to, and if you do have to jump your car, you have something that it can latch onto. So far so good. I'm gonna go ahead and continue working on this. Once I have this wired up, we'll go ahead and jump over to the hob switch. One thing I do want to mention is they could probably stand to give us a little bit of extra wire, at least on this negative. It will reach, but it's very, very tight. There's maybe a ½ inch of slack. I don't know if you guys can see that, until it's completely taut. So I don't know, considering I got 50 feet of this wire and 8 inches here, maybe just something that could be improved with this kit. I do want to mention, you could always cut this off and extend these ground cables, and then just put your own connector at the end of that cable that has a larger hole, and then you could get away with not having to drill that out, have a larger ground cable, and not have to drill that out. So that's another thing you could possibly do. I'm not really gonna stress out about that right now. Everything's looking good so far, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue. Here's how far I got. So far so good. Battery's back in. When I put the battery back in, I made sure I pushed it all the way towards the firewall as much as I could to give me as much clearance for these studs that I have here. Studs look good. The way I have it routed is I have the wiring loom coming this way, as you can see here, zip tied. It kind of follows the same path my wiring took for the gauges. You are going to have to take the battery out to get it under here. This hinge does touch the battery here, so you're not gonna be able to sneak this loom past that without taking the battery out. So anyway, tucked it under, have the loom going this way next to the fuse box, and then the small part of the short part of this wiring harness, I have it kind of looping back this way. And I have the two positives on the battery here, and then the negative here. Just be careful when you guys are tightening these down. Make sure that they're actually touching all the way. Let's see if I can get here. You're going to be looking for spaces
between all these fittings, make sure that they're completely closed, there's no gaps. Same thing here, you don't want any gaps. You can check by taking the wire and trying to move it up and down. If it moves, it's not tight enough. Alternatively, you also don't want to strip the bolt or pull the stud out of the battery. So